Good morning, everyone. My name is Conor Battigan from Sandyford Business District. For those of you that don't know, Sandyford Business District is the largest business improvement district on the island. It has four business parks: Central Park, South County, Sandyford and Stillorgan. It has 26,000 employees, 1,000 companies, 5,000 residents. And I like to describe it as a city within a city. It is a very diverse district with many clusters such as medtech, fintech, hospitality, autotech, and much more. It is great to see so many people from inside Sandyford Business District and outside the business district joining us this morning. Today's webinar is about cyber crime and security. It would last approximately 40 to 45 minutes, and we will be taking questions throughout and dealing with them towards the end. This morning, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Des Ryan, Director of Solutions, Microsoft Ireland. It is worth pointing out that Microsoft is one of the longest established companies in Sandyford Business District, having been here for over 30 years. Des, good morning. How have you been coping, first of all, during the pandemic?
Morning, Conor, and good morning, everybody. Look, for me personally, it's been a fascinating 6 months. From a personal perspective, it's been quite good. I live in Limerick and work out of the office there in Dublin, so it's enabled me to spend a whole lot more time with my family, which is always a good thing. From a business perspective, Microsoft continues to perform, and while we have to overcome the same obstacles that everybody else does in terms of the challenges that various people have with remote working, I guess we're probably a little bit more used to it than many organizations.
Yeah, you're probably quite fortunate as working for one of the world leaders in their industry and having so much, I suppose, software, that's easily accessible. And you've probably slipped into it a lot easier than others. But today we're going to talk specifically, Des, about cybercrime, and cybercrime is one of the biggest growing crimes in the world, and you're going to give us some insights into cybercrime and security.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So for the broader audience, my name is Des Ryan, I'm Director of Solutions at Microsoft. So in my role, I lead the technical and the sales teams for Microsoft in Ireland. I'm also the leader of Microsoft Ireland's security business. So spend quite a bit of time with customers talking about security and security incidents, unfortunately. So happy to talk you through some insights that I've got here and that Microsoft have got. If you want to move on to the first slide there, please. So look, I don't think I need to explain this slide in any real detail. Extortion has been around for as long as humanity itself. It's long been the case that if you have something of value belonging to somebody, whether it's something material or their good name, they will pay money to get it back. What has changed, I guess, over time is where previously you needed physical proximity to somebody to take whatever that valuable is and to receive your payment. What's changed is the internet now has people connected all over the world, and so you can use the internet to take valuables from somebody at the other side of the world. And cryptocurrencies, the emergence of cryptocurrencies has allowed you to receive payment in return for those valuables. So that's enabled a huge surge over the last number of years in cybercrime or ransomware in particular. Cybercrime's been around for a long time, but ransomware is really the most prevalent form of cybercrime at the moment. We'll move to the next slide. So one of the challenges that we have with security and with cybercrime is that people can be skeptical about it. Every single day there is a new headline talking about a security breach, and people feel like they're immune to it. These things happen to big organizations at the other side of the world, and it's true. Big organizations all over the world are getting hit. If you look at the headlines here on this page, down at the bottom you'll see 223 million YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram accounts have been exposed in a massive data breach. That's this week. So the big organizations do get hit. And unfortunately in Ireland, people feel like, well, we're little old Ireland, no one's going to come and attack us. I can tell you categorically from my interactions with customers that attacks in Ireland are very, very prevalent. And some of them are on the screen here. And the one thing I'll say about these headlines is these headlines are all from this week. So the Children's Hospital in Crumlin is probably the one that's the newest one. Over the last couple of days, it's emerged that anyone who's made a donation to the Children's Hospital has been caught up in a security breach, where that data, the data of all of the contributors to the hospital has been exposed. So this is very real, and when impact happens, it can be quite significant. So this slide here talks about the impact of a cyber attack. I'm not sure if many of you will be aware of a company called Finabler. You might be more familiar with their street name, Travelex, which is what I guess they're most known for. Global organization, very, very significant. And you can see there at the very start of January of this year, their stock price was $173. And you can also see that it started to tumble almost immediately after that. They were very unlucky in that they were hit by a cyber attack and immediately were caught up in COVID. They're one of the most impacted industries in terms of COVID. But their stock price dropped from 173 down to somewhere in the region of 80 because of a cyber attack. Some interesting things about the cyber attack. So it was the Sodinokibi ransomware was the specific attack that they came under. And it reduced them to paper and pencil. So an organization with revenues over $1 billion were using pen and paper to transact their business as they recovered from a cyber attack. Absolutely crippled them. One of the interesting things about that particular attack was right in the middle of the attack, the BBC managed to interview the attackers. And they did that through a help chat line that the attackers had to interact with the people that they'd attacked, so Finabler, to talk them through how to buy Bitcoin and to pay the ransom. So the BBC interviewed them through the course of the attack, and it came to light through the interviews that they actually had been compromised almost 6 months earlier, and the attackers had spent 5 or 6 months surveying the environment, understanding where the crown jewels in the environment was. So when they were ready to launch their attack, and they launched it on the 1st of January, it was as devastating as it possibly could be. And that's a theme that we're seeing a lot of. These attacks come at the end of long-term surveillance. Lots of cases where people have been penetrated or compromised already and they're not aware of it. In this instance, they didn't pay the ransomware, and it took them almost 6 weeks to get back up online. So I just wanted to kind of highlight the impact that these attacks can have on a business. So this next couple of slides are about Microsoft from a security perspective. We're not known necessarily as a security company because we've got so many different technologies. But the reality is we're probably one of the biggest security companies in the world. The key to modern security is intelligence. You need to know what's happening so you can defend against it. The days where you would have a firewall defending your perimeter are long gone. And Microsoft's, the intelligence that Microsoft gathers from its various technologies is second to none around the world. So across Microsoft's infrastructure, whether it's our Xbox infrastructure, whether it's our Office 365 business-focused infrastructure, our consumer technologies like Outlook or Hotmail, Bing, which scans web pages and understands whether there's a security risk with them. Across all of this infrastructure, we take in about 6.5 trillion signals a day. There's no other organization in the world with that level of insight into what's happening out on the internet. And what we do then is we process those 6.5 trillion signals, and we filter them down, and we understand which ones are real risks, and which ones are business as normal and don't need to be responded to. Move to the next slide. One of the ways that we're able to process that level of information is because we leverage our artificial intelligence. And so we have a cyber defense center where all of those signals are processed. We've got a huge number of people physically there. We filter out the false positives, first of all, using artificial intelligence. And then we have people who investigate the threats that come through that. We also have a team of people who spend their life on the dark web looking at threats before they're even launched. And so we have a huge insight into what's going on from a cybersecurity perspective. So what do Microsoft do with all of that information? Microsoft's mission statement is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. That doesn't mean you have to be a Microsoft customer for us to want to help you achieve more. And so Microsoft will, where appropriate, we will, when we see a threat out on the internet, intervene and take it out of play. Protecting our customers is definitely a major part of that, but it's for the greater good of the internet, generally speaking. And so this slide's got a couple of examples there where we've gone and we've intervened to take out malicious activity out on the internet. We also build that security insight into our technologies. So whether you're a user of our Office 365 technologies, which a lot of you will be, when you buy those technologies, you're buying the insights and the email protection that we get from those insights. If you're a user of Windows 10, again, you're leveraging the insights that we get from all of those signals, and we're helping to defend your workstation using the likes of Defender HCP. So we build the insights and the security infrastructure into the technologies that we sell every single day and that many people use every single day. So while we might not necessarily be called out as a security company, I often start these presentations by asking the audience, are Microsoft a security company? And usually there's one or two hands that go up, but most people would say probably not. That's because we're not known for it. But we do have a number of specific security technologies, the likes of Sentinel, for example, which is a pure security application. So we do have standalone security products as well as having security built into our technologies. And this slide just kind of illustrates the fact that where we do have a security capability, we are industry recognized as leaders in the security field. So with that insight, so what are we seeing in terms of the security threats? So the left-hand side of this slide talks about a 37% drop in ransomware attacks through 2019, but at the same time, a 62% increase in targeted ransomware attacks. So the difference between the two there for your insights is where previously a ransomware attack was based on a large-scale spam. So that the hackers would get as many email addresses as they possibly could. They would send out a phishing email to those in the hope that one or two people might click on them and expose themselves to an attack. That proved to be, well, while it worked for sure, it didn't give the best bang for buck for the hackers, because they were compromising the PCs of somebody's grandmother who didn't know how to buy Bitcoin. And so over the last 3 years, you can see here what the trend is that the bad guys are attacking specific people. So they are now targeting the individuals that they want to compromise, and they're targeting the companies that they want to compromise. And there's been a significant increase in target attacks as a result. So why the change? I guess I just talked about this a little bit. When you target an enterprise, or you get a high value victim, enterprises tend to pay more than somebody's grandmother. If you are very successful in your attack and you cripple an organization, it becomes a business decision whether or not to pay the ransom. Brand damage is also leading to people paying ransom. So it has proved over the last little while to be far more profitable for the bad guys to target enterprises. Next slide. So what are the kinds of attacks that are prevalent? And so you can see this graph goes similar to the previous one, where an increase, and these are targeted attacks that we're talking about here. You can see that through 2017 there was the SamSam attack type, and that continued to increase in terms of its prevalence until about November of 2018, when it stopped quite suddenly. But before it had stopped, it had spawned a number of imitation type of attacks, and they've continued to build in terms of their trend. The example from the start of this presentation where Finabler or Travelex were impacted was the Sodonokibi attack, and you can see that that is probably the most prevalent that's out there at the moment. So why did SamSam stop in November 2018? The reason it stopped was because the FBI got involved and they identified who was behind the attack. It was two Iranian guys. You can see their pictures there on the most wanted signs. And so why did the FBI get involved? Well, because of the shift in focus from individuals to organizations, the impact was getting far more significant in terms of the American economy. And so the FBI have really stepped up their game in terms of looking into and prosecuting these kinds of attacks. The two individuals here disappeared off the face of the earth. They haven't been captured. But yeah, since the end of 2018, these guys have disappeared. I think it's a great example of how the FBI has increased their focus in this area. And I was lucky enough to hear them speak. They've got some incredible tools and capabilities that I guess corporate organizations don't necessarily have. We do work with the likes of the FBI in the background in terms of helping them identify who might be behind some of these attacks. It should be noted there that was not. It's not considered to have been a state-sponsored attack. This was two individuals looking to profit themselves. So next thing I want to talk to you about is some local research that Microsoft did into security and attitudes to security in Ireland. So we did the first piece of research was in 2019, and just before COVID, we did a second piece of research. And I think in light of COVID, it's really interesting for us to look deeper at some of the things that we found in this research, because definitely impacts how organizations need to think about things like remote working in the COVID world. So if you go to the next slide. So in 2019, what we did was we interviewed employees, end user employees of I think it was 800 of Ireland's top organizations. And the top organizations, we're talking here with people with more than 250 employees. So I'm sure many of you were part of the organizations that we were researching. This research talked to them quite broadly in terms of technology and their technology usage, but specifically it had a security slant to it. And some of the findings were quite concerning in terms of GDPR and just general security. So even today, after years and years of people talking about it, 22% of people still write down their passwords. 16% of organizations don't require people to change their passwords regularly. That's that's really concerning. I think there's definitely a need for people to take security more seriously. I think the bottom left-hand side of the, if you go back, sorry, the bottom left-hand side of this slide is probably the area that I think is most concerning in the COVID world. So 36% of people that were interviewed have backed up their corporate data to a personal device. In other words, they backed up the files on their laptop to a non-corporate backup device. You have to ask the question, well, where is that data? What was that data? You know, those 36% of people have possibly exposed their organizations to GDPR breaches. The other concerning one here was 49% of people working remotely were using their personal email addresses when working with work-related files. So here we're talking about people emailing files from their workplace to their personal Gmail account or whatever it might be, so that they could work on the file at home rather than having to bring home their laptop. Again, you have to ask the question, people's personal email, if that person no longer works for an organization, that file is still somewhere out there. It's in their sent mail, it's in their inboxes. Who's controlling that data? Again, it's potentially significant breach of GDPR regulations. So some fairly significant things here in terms of how people use technology, and you can see a lot of them in new remote working world would cause concern for anybody who's thinking about security in these organizations. Then the research that we launched was kind of coupled with that just before COVID hit, where we interviewed the organizations, the business decision makers in the organizations themselves. And again, you know, the top three threats, as we've talked about here, ransomware attacks and the threat sophistication. People are worried about it. 76% of senior managers are worried about the ongoing digital threat. You know, I actually am surprised that's not 100%. You know, senior management needs to be worried about this because it is real. And when I talked about the headlines and the fact that those headlines are real, and I see it every single day, it concerns me that only 76% of senior managers are thinking about security in the way that I think everybody should be. People are planning to spend some more money in this area. 49% want to increase their investment in this area. I think in light of COVID, they probably want to step that up even further. And there's definitely a recruitment challenge in terms of getting access to people. So it's important in the security world that you're leveraging the intelligence from technologies from the likes of Microsoft, but not just Microsoft. There are others who have intelligence built into their technology, because we share what we find in terms of what's going on the internet with partner organizations. So it's important that people can continue to take security very seriously. So then in terms of COVID, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, said we've had 2 years of digital transformation in the space of 2 months. And it's true. You know, Microsoft had a huge amount of customers come to us immediately after COVID, people who would previously not have had remote working as part of their corporate agenda, immediately wanting to go and enable Teams, for example. And so there's been a lot of positive experiences for those organizations now, where people are working remotely and that people are seeing that remote working is viable and it does work. But the speed at which some of these organizations have deployed these new technologies concerns me as a security leader. I think it's going to be really important over the next few months that people go back, and where they deployed very, very quickly, just review how that deployment was done. Did they have to make some compromises in doing so? And Microsoft have got plenty of partners who can help in this area. I would call it the likes of Threatscape or CWSI, who are specific security Microsoft partners. But yeah, I think COVID has been interesting in terms of it's proving that remote working is a long-term model. I think it'll be great for rural Ireland and for the likes of me here in Limerick. I do think that the pace of the implementation has been a concern. The other thing that we saw through COVID was it's not as prevalent now, but immediately when COVID hit, when people were adapting to working remotely, the bad actors out there were definitely trying to take advantage, and where people were a bit discombobulated with trying to work at home with young children shouting in their ear. They might be more prevalent to clicking on compromised links. So we did see a real surge in terms of phishing attacks and early on, and we have seen a number of domains spring up, COVID-19 related domains spring up where people are trying to give themselves credibility by having a domain with COVID-19 written into it. And so Microsoft have done a lot of work to disable and to take down some of those domains where they're being used for nefarious deeds. So that's kind of what I was going to cover. I hope there was some good insights for you through that. I think there's some questions, so happy to field any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Des. First of all, Des, some very frightening statistics, I have to say, in relation to the number of attacks, and I suppose cybercrime has become like really sophisticated, and the people behind it, it's been run like a business that's almost business like, looking for you're talking about targeted attacks, so they're looking for return on investment.
Yep.
Which is they're clever individuals. It's not just a guy knocking on the door of an elderly person trying to deceive them and lighten their wallet.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will have looked at the Travelex example, where they had effectively had a support line there for their victims, to support them, to interact with them, and to show them how to resolve the issue by paying Bitcoin. I think that's a great example, but it definitely illustrates that these are not people that are fly by night. They are industrial in their scale.
Yeah. Like sometimes, I know for me personally, it's hard sometimes to differentiate what is genuine and what isn't, because there's so many emails you're receiving on a day-to-day basis. And I recently read an article about an Irish company who had ordered product, I think for somewhere in Europe. The invoice was sent by the company they were ordering product from, but the invoice was intercepted.
Yeah.
And it appeared genuine. Some contact details and obviously the bank account detail were changed. The company in Ireland did their due diligence, picked up the phone, rang the number on the invoice to verify that the bank details were correct. They responded and said that yes, they were. The company transferred the money, and it's quite a significant amount of money. But the people they were speaking to at the end of the phone was actually the cybercrime company. So that's how sophisticated it's become. So we all should obviously be very wary of cybercrime and security and the impacts of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. The just in relation to, I suppose, remote working, you touched on it in an earlier on slide, but have attacks increased because of remote working, because of employees have been using their own private email address or not following, let's say, internal IT policy? Have you guys seen that happening?
Yes, yeah. So there's no question that there was a significant spike early in the COVID scenario. So where there was an increase in phishing emails. So there's absolutely no question that was the case. Whether people are using personal emails or private emails is probably a slightly different thing, in that they obviously become potentially more exposed, because if you're using those technologies, typically you wouldn't have the same defenses that a corporation would have. So it does, I guess, increase the likelihood of someone being compromised. But definitely early on, there was a massive spike in terms of the kinds of attacks. You got to remember that these guys are opportunists. They will use whatever cover that comes along to carry out their work. And COVID was a great cover story. It was a great opportunity for them to um, to use it to attack people, particularly early on in the piece where people, there was a good example where you might remember early on there was a global map which was tracking the number of COVID cases around the world, and you could kind of track by country, and there was 3 or 4 of those popped up, which had malware built into them, and so they were being sent around by WhatsApp message. Hey, if you want to track what's going on in terms of COVID cases globally, click on this link, and people were being caught out. So these guys, as I said, they're opportunists. They will use whatever means they can to get access to people.
Yeah. Thanks, Des. Like in Sandy for Business District, like I previously mentioned, there was 1,000 companies. Yes, they're the likes of Microsoft, huge companies, massive resources, but there's also SMEs, there's micro companies as well. So I suppose the advice to, any company, large or small, especially the smaller companies, is to have an IT policy, and that needs to be followed, especially during remote working. But like, how have you any sort of advice or hints and tips in terms of how to develop a policy like that? Is that something that you're familiar with? And
Yeah,
is
absolutely. I think there's probably 2 or 3 things that I would say. First is awareness. I didn't talk about it when the slide was up there, but one of the findings of the research that we did was 50% or thereabouts, I think it was 51%, of the people that we interviewed had no security awareness training or no security training at all in the organizations that they were working for. So for me, we need to be talking about security. That's why I do these presentations, is to make sure that people are aware, and they're aware of the kinds of threats. Because we need to be talking about this. We need end users to be aware of what to look out for when they get sent the link. As you talked about, you find it difficult to know what's real and what's not real. We can't necessarily kill every threat, but we need to make people aware of what they're looking for, what to look out for. So that's one area that I think that people need to focus on. Obviously, technology, the technology that's in place. I work for Microsoft. I would love for you all to be buying Microsoft technology. But whatever technology partner you choose, you just make sure that it's fit for purpose. Security changes all of the time. The kinds of threats change all of the time. And so you need to continue to revisit your infrastructure. You need to be patching things. You need to be updating things. Otherwise, you'll fall behind. And as soon as you fall behind, you're going to expose yourself to a compromise. So you need to look at the infrastructure that you've got, defending your organization. And then on top of that, you need to have your policies. Your policies around, how often you change your passwords, your policies around data loss prevention. All of these things are things that are configurable. And so I would call for those 3 things to be looked at by all organizations.
Okay. Just in relation to email, Des, is that the primary form of attack that, the cybercrime, the guys behind cybercrime, is that what they use to target people? Is that the most effective form of attack?
Yeah, that is definitely, I would say that's probably the most significant area that we see getting targeted, because it's easy to do. It's easy to mock up a domain and send an email to somebody. And, you can do some research on. There was a great example. I won't talk about who the company was, but there was a great example where attackers they looked on LinkedIn for database managers within a specific organization, and they got a list of 100 database administrators, and they mocked up an email about a conference in a nice location specifically for database administrators in that particular industry, and they sent an email to these 100 odd victims, and they were going to click on it, and they did click on it. And when they clicked on it, they downloaded a piece of malware onto their hardware, onto their machines, and gave these guys access to all of the data within those databases that these guys managed. I mean, it's very simple to target people, if you think about it in those terms.
Yeah,
That's why
no,
it's so devastating. That's why it's so devastating.
yeah, that's incredible, and it's, I suppose, the reason you would click into it because first of all it looks genuine, but
Yeah,
secondly it's an area of interest.
yeah,
You're working on it, you're passionate about it, so yeah, I can see why people do. And there's a couple of queries and questions in relation to passwords there. So there's two in relation to passwords. One is I know there's various sort of password softwares out there or applications where you can have one password to access all your passwords. In your opinion, is that a good idea?
Yeah, so you're talking about there about a password manager.
Yeah,
They're definitely useful if somebody's got lots of different passwords for um, various systems. We are seeing, and I think it's important for people to think about passwords. People are moving away from passwords. So conditional access and things like that are being used more and more. So within Microsoft, we don't use passwords at all. Um, you have a password when you're set up initially, but what Microsoft now does is it tracks your behaviors. I log in from my laptop, and it knows the laptop is in Limerick. They know that it's most likely to be me. If 30 minutes later I'm logging in from Dublin, they know there's a question mark there. So people are moving away from passwords. Biometrics is becoming more and more used. So I guess smaller organizations maybe aren't at the cutting edge of that stuff, but yes, to answer the question, those password management applications are good, but I'd encourage people to think beyond passwords.
yeah, that's very interesting. What you're mentioning there about passwords, and then it picking up on the location, and obviously you couldn't have traveled that
Yeah.
location in 30 minutes, so it obviously recognizes that there's an issue. That there's another query in relation to passwords, and it's in relation to Microsoft. I think you probably answered it, but when a user is on Office 365, Microsoft recommends not enforcing password changes, and the explanation says it's because users tend to choose weak passwords when they change frequently. Yeah, I suppose there is some.
There's a trade-off there for sure. Yeah. And again, that's why Microsoft have moved away from those
Yeah.
kinds of things.
Okay. The last question we have, Des, we have someone, I'm not aware of it myself, but to activate modern authentication, MFA, TFA on their 365 accounts, it significantly reduces the ability of hackers to compromise accounts. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So multi-factor authentication, it just means that if I have a password, that's not enough for me to log into my system. Again, if I use Microsoft as an example, if something unusual has happened about how I'm logging in, Microsoft will then use a third factor. They'll call my mobile phone and ask me to put in a PIN number to verify that it was me that was trying to do that. So multi-factor authentication is definitely something we would be recommending.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so if you haven't set it up in your account, please do is the advice. Just conscious of time, we're up at 40 minutes. Look, Des Ryan, Microsoft Ireland, thank you so much for your insights. Some of them frightening in relation to the amount of cyber attacks and that are happening on a day-to-day basis, and the stuff that's happening. Quite recently, what we've seen in one of the slides that happened this week. I suppose as I said, it's a crime that's one of the biggest growing crimes in the world. It's here to stay. So look, we all need to, I suppose, review our policies and stay up to date with what's happening. So Des Ryan, Director of Solutions, Microsoft Ireland, thank you very much for your time this morning.
My
Um,
pleasure.
the webinar will remain on our website, sandyford.ie, and the website is recorded. So please feel free to, if you feel you've missed anything, go back to our website, sandyford.ie, for this webinar and previous webinars. And you can stay up to date with all supports available, government supports and any COVID updates on sandyford.ie and anything that's happening within Sandyford Business District on sandyford.ie. Our next webinar is taking place on September 10th, where we will be joined by the highly regarded Oliver Mangan, Chief Economist, AIB, and further details will follow over the coming days. So thank you to Des, Ryan again from Microsoft Ireland, and everybody for joining us, and stay safe.
Thank you. Have a good day.